They sat in the lawyer's office like vultures picking over a carcass. My cousins, Brad, Jennifer, and Michael, dressed in expensive suits and designer clothes, checking their phones, barely able to hide their impatience. They'd flown in from Dallas, New York, and LA the moment Uncle Ray died, suddenly concerned about the man they'd ignored for 2 decades. I sat in the corner, wearing the only clean shirt I owned over my work jeans, dirt still under my fingernails from that morning's work. I'd been up since 4 a.m. feeding cattle, mending fences, doing what I'd done every day for 20 years since Uncle Ray took me in at 25 when I had nothing. The lawyer, a thin man named Morrison with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and began reading. I, Raymond James Patterson, being of sound mind. Legal language droned on. My cousins leaned forward when Morrison got to the assets. The ranch, comprising 800 acres, all livestock, equipment, and the main house, I leave to my nephews and niece, Bradley, Jennifer, and Michael Patterson, to be divided equally among them. My stomach dropped. Brad smirked. Jennifer didn't even look up from her phone. Michael said, "What about the foreman?" Morrison looked at me with something like pity. To my nephew Thomas Patterson, who has worked the ranch faithfully, I leave my personal effects and the sum of $5,000. $5,000. For 20 years of sunrise to sunset work, for building this ranch from struggling to profitable, for staying when everyone else left, for loving a difficult old man who had no one else. Brad stood up. Great. Tom, we'll need you to clear out by the end of the month. We're selling to a developer. They're offering $3 million. You understand? I understood perfectly. I'd given them everything, and they were taking it all. But I didn't know yet that Uncle Ray had left me something they'd never find, something hidden, something worth more than all of them combined. I walked out of that office in a daze. Didn't hear Brad calling after me about logistics, about clearing the barn, about handing over keys. I drove the 20 miles back to the ranch on autopilot, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The land stretched out on either side of the highway, rolling hills, green pastures, cattle grazing peacefully. I'd worked every inch of this land, knew every fence post, every water source, every seasonal challenge. Uncle Ray had taught me everything. How to birth a calf at midnight in freezing rain, how to spot disease before it spread, how to manage drought years and abundant years, how to love the land without expecting it to love you back. He'd been hard, never gave compliments, rarely showed affection, but he'd given me purpose when I was lost, given me a home when I was homeless, given me a life when I'd thought mine was over, and I'd repaid him with loyalty, 20 years of it. Never complained, never asked for more, just worked, figured someday it'd matter. The ranch house came into view, a modest 2-story building Uncle Ray's grandfather had built in 1920. I'd repaired the roof 3 times, repainted it twice, fixed the plumbing more times than I could count. I parked in front of the barn, a massive red structure that was older than the house, the heart of the operation. This was where I'd spent most of my time, where Uncle Ray and I had worked side by side in comfortable silence, where he'd taught me that hard work was its own reward, where I'd believed I was building something that mattered. I sat in my truck staring at the barn, fighting tears. In 2 weeks, it'd all be gone, bulldozed for a subdivision. Patterson Acres would become Willow Creek Estates, with cookie-cutter houses and HOA regulations. Everything Uncle Ray had built, everything his father and grandfather had built, erased. And my cousins would walk away with $1 million each, having never lifted a finger. I finally climbed out of the truck, had to start clearing the barn like Brad demanded. At least I could do that one last thing right. The barn was dim and cool, smelling of hay and oil and decades of work. I stood in the doorway letting my eyes adjust, memories flooding back. Uncle Ray teaching me to fix the tractor engine right there by the workbench, helping a first-time mother cow deliver twins over there in the birthing pen, stacking hay bales in the loft during summer, Uncle Ray working beside me despite being 30 years older, both of us covered in sweat and dust. "This barn's been here longer than any of us," he'd said once, leaning on his pitchfork. "It'll be here long after we're gone. That's what matters. Not being remembered, but building something that lasts." I started with the workbench, sorting through tools. Uncle Ray's handwriting was on masking tape labels, "Good wrench," and "Broke," "Needs fixing," and "Don't use unless emergency." His humor, dry and spare, present even in tool organization. I packed carefully, each tool a memory. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, light shifting through the high windows. I worked mechanically, trying not to think about what came after this. Where would I go? I had $5,000 and no prospects. I was 47 years old with skills that only mattered on a ranch. Who'd hire a middle-aged ranch hand with no formal education? By late afternoon, I'd cleared most of the ground floor. Only the hayloft remained. I climbed the wooden ladder slowly, my boots finding the familiar worn spots on each rung. The loft was stuffed with hay bales, old equipment, things we'd stored and forgotten over the years. I started moving bales, creating a path to the far wall where I remembered seeing some old tack Uncle Ray wanted saved. That's when I noticed it, the floorboard, one single board, newer than the others, fitting just slightly wrong. I'd walked over this loft 1,000 times and never noticed. But now, in the angled late afternoon light, I saw the gap. Something made me kneel down. Something made me pry at it. The board came up easily. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather folder. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside the leather folder was a document, old but preserved, written in formal legal language. At the top, Deed of Trust. My heart pounded as I read. It was dated 15 years ago, 5 years after I'd started working for Uncle Ray. The document established a trust, transferring ownership of 300 acres of the ranch, the northern section, the most valuable land with water rights and the best grazing, into a separate entity. And the beneficiary, named explicitly in the trust deed, was me, Thomas James Patterson. The land couldn't be sold, couldn't be touched by anyone else. It was mine, had been mine for 15 years. I just hadn't known it. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the paper. 300 acres. At current market value, easily $1 million. But it wasn't about the money. It was about what it meant. Uncle Ray had done this, quietly, secretly, had never mentioned it, never hinted, had let me work those years thinking I was building his legacy when really, I was building my own. He'd protected me, protected this land, made sure that when the vultures came, they couldn't take everything. There was a letter tucked behind the deed, in Uncle Ray's handwriting. I opened it carefully. Tom, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and those worthless kids of my brothers probably told you you're getting nothing. They're wrong. This land is yours. I put it in trust the day I realized you weren't going to leave, that you actually love this place like I do. Couldn't tell you. You'd have argued, said it was too much, tried to refuse. So I did it quiet. The lawyer Morrison knows about this. He was instructed not to mention it at the will reading. Wanted to see if those 3 vultures showed their true colors. Figured they would. Now you know why I didn't leave them everything. They don't deserve it. You do. Not because you're blood, you're more than that. You're the son I never had. The one who stayed. Build something good here, Tom. Build something that lasts. And when those 3 come circling, show them this and watch them squirm. You earned this. Every acre. Ray. I sat in that dusty hayloft, Uncle Ray's letter in one hand and the deed in the other, and sobbed. I don't know how long I sat there crying. Long enough for the sun to move, for the light through the loft window to shift from gold to orange to deep red. Long enough for 20 years of exhaustion and grief and feeling unappreciated to pour out. Long enough to let it all go. When I finally stopped, I felt different, lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't know was there, and Uncle Ray had just lifted it. I read the deed again, carefully this time, making sure I understood. The trust was ironclad. Morrison had filed it with the county 15 years ago. The northern 300 acres, including the best water rights, the main grazing pasture, and the original homestead cabin, belonged to the trust, and I was the sole beneficiary and trustee. My cousins had inherited the southern 500 acres, the main house, and the equipment. Valuable, sure, but without water rights and the best grazing land, significantly less valuable, and definitely not worth $3 million, maybe half that. Uncle Ray had split it perfectly. They got enough to feel like they won. I got the land that actually mattered. I carefully rewrapped the deed in the oilcloth and climbed down from the loft. My truck was still parked outside, the late sun turning everything gold. I stood in the barn doorway looking out at my land, because it was mine now, officially, legally mine, and started planning. First, I'd call Morrison tomorrow, confirm everything, get the trust documents officially in my name, make sure my cousins couldn't touch it. Second, I'd tell Brad, Jennifer, and Michael. Watch their faces when they realized they didn't get everything. Watch them scramble to recalculate their developer deal when they learned 300 crucial acres weren't for sale. Third, I'd start building. Uncle Ray said, build something that lasts. I'd build a life here. Maybe find a partner to share it. Maybe take on a young worker like Uncle Ray took me in. Give someone else a chance. Maybe just live quiet and work hard and love this land the way it deserved. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Cattle lowed in the distance. Somewhere a hawk cried. And standing there, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Uncle Ray had given me more than land. He'd given me validation, proof that loyalty mattered, that hard work counted, that the right person sees and values you even when they don't say it. I locked the barn and drove back to the small foreman's cabin I'd called home for 20 years. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tonight, I'd sleep better than I had in months. The next morning, I called Morrison at exactly 8 a.m. Mr. Morrison, it's Tom Patterson. I found something in the barn yesterday. A deed. A trust deed. Silence. Then, I was wondering when you'd find that. Your uncle made me promise not to tell you until you found it yourself. Said if you didn't find it, you didn't deserve it. Is it real? Is it legal? Completely. I filed it myself 15 years ago. The northern 300 acres belong to the Patterson Ranch Trust, with you as beneficiary and trustee. Your cousins have no claim to it whatsoever. They don't know. They will when they try to sell. The developer's going to do a title search and discover 300 prime acres aren't available. That should be an interesting conversation. I could hear the smile in his voice. Your uncle was a smart man, Tom. He knew exactly what would happen when he died. Knew his brother's kids would swoop in for the money. He wanted to teach them a lesson about greed. And he wanted to reward you for loyalty. Why didn't he just leave me everything? Because then they'd contest the will, claim undue influence, mental incompetence, all the usual. This way it's unchallengeable. The trust was established when your uncle was 65 and demonstrably sharp. It's been filed and legal for 15 years. There's no contest. You won, Tom. You just didn't know you were playing. I thanked Morrison and hung up. Stood in my small cabin looking at the deed spread on my kitchen table. 300 acres of prime ranch land, water rights that were worth a fortune in this drought-prone region, the original homestead cabin that could be restored. It was more than I'd ever dreamed. My phone rang. Brad. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. On the fourth call, I answered. What? Tom, we need to talk. There's a problem with the title search. The developer says 300 acres aren't included in our property. Some kind of trust? Do you know anything about this? I let the silence stretch. Enjoyed it. Finally, yeah, I know about it. Found the deed yesterday in the barn. Uncle Ray put 300 acres in trust for me 15 years ago. They're mine, not for sale. Brad's voice went cold. That's impossible. We inherited the ranch. You inherited 500 acres. I inherited 300, different parts of the will. This is bullshit. We're going to contest. Go ahead. It's been legally filed for 15 years. Good luck. I hung up. He called back immediately. I didn't answer. Over the next week, my cousins tried everything. Brad called repeatedly, first angry, then negotiating, finally begging. Look, Tom, be reasonable. We'll cut you in. Sell your portion too. We'll give you a third of everything. Not interested. $500,000, Tom. Cash. You could retire. I don't want to retire. I want to ranch. Jennifer tried next, her voice syrupy sweet. Tom, I didn't realize Uncle Ray had done this. It's wonderful that he left you something, but don't you think it's a little unfair? We're family too. You haven't been here in 20 years, Jennifer. You're not family, you're relatives. There's a difference. That's cruel. What's cruel is showing up only when someone dies and you smell money. Uncle Ray knew exactly what he was doing. Michael was the worst. Threatened legal action, claimed Morrison had conspired with me to defraud them, even hinted he'd make trouble for me locally. I let him rage. When he finally wound down, I said quietly, Your father and Uncle Ray were brothers. They grew up on this ranch. Your dad left, made money, raised you in the city. Uncle Ray stayed, built this place, and when I needed help, he gave it. He made his choice about who deserved what. You can hate it, but you can't change it. The developer called me directly, offered to buy my 300 acres separately. We'd go as high as $800,000 for your parcel, Mr. Patterson. The water rights alone are worth that. Not for sale. Everyone has a price. Mine isn't money. It's keeping this land the way it should be. Sorry. He hung up frustrated. My cousins, realizing they couldn't sell the ranch as a complete package and couldn't force me to sell my portion, finally accepted a lower offer from a different buyer, a rancher from Wyoming who wanted to expand. He paid them $800,000 for 500 acres, about half what they'd expected. I ran into Brad at Morrison's office during the final paperwork. He looked at me with pure hatred. You manipulated him. Old man was senile and you took advantage. Your uncle was sharper than you'll ever be. He saw exactly who you were. That's why you got money and I got land. Money runs out. Land lasts. Brad leaned close. Enjoy your dirt farm, Tom. You'll die alone out there just like he did. I smiled. Maybe. But I'll die knowing I built something real. What will you die knowing? He walked away without answering. The Wyoming rancher, a man named Bill Henderson, turned out to be a good neighbor. He ran cattle on the southern 500 acres, but respected boundaries, maintained fences, and occasionally stopped by to talk shop. Your uncle was legendary in ranching circles, he told me one evening, sitting on my porch drinking beer. People knew he turned down development offers for years, knew he valued the land over money. That's rare. He taught me that. You planning to run cattle on your 300? Eventually. Right now I'm restoring the old homestead cabin. Thinking about living there, using this foreman's cabin for hired help if I ever can afford any. Bill nodded thoughtfully. I've got a nephew, Jake. 23, good worker, wants to learn ranching. He could use a mentor. You interested in taking someone on? I thought about Uncle Ray taking me in at 25, about how that one act of faith had changed my entire life. Tell him to come by next week. We'll talk. Jake showed up the following Monday, a tall, quiet kid with calloused hands and a willingness to learn. Reminded me of myself 20 years ago. I hired him on the spot, offered him the foreman's cabin and a percentage of profits once we got the operation running. Over the next year, we worked together. Rebuilt fences, rotated pastures, bought a starter herd of cattle, restored the homestead cabin until it was livable. I moved into the old cabin, one room, wood stove, no running water initially, and lived like Uncle Ray's grandfather must have lived. It was hard. It was simple. It was perfect. Jake learned fast, asked good questions, worked without complaining. At night, we'd sit on the porch of the old cabin and I'd tell him about Uncle Ray, passing on the lessons I'd learned. Why didn't he just tell you about the land? Jake asked one evening. I'd thought about that a lot. Because if he'd told me, I might have worked differently, might have felt entitled. This way, I worked for love of the work itself, and when I got the reward, I'd earned it honestly. He was teaching me one last lesson. Real inheritance isn't what you're given. It's what you build. Jake nodded slowly. That's pretty wise. That was Uncle Ray. Didn't talk much, but when he did, it mattered. That first year was hard but satisfying. We turned a small profit, enough to reinvest, to buy a few more head of cattle, to fix the irrigation system. The land responded. Grass grew thick, cattle thrived, and slowly, the ranch became mine not just legally, but spiritually. 2 years after Uncle Ray's death, I got a call from Jennifer. Her voice was different, smaller, uncertain. Tom, it's Jennifer. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but can we talk? I almost said no, but something in her voice made me pause. About what? I'm in town. Just me? Could I come out to the ranch? I promise I'm not here about money or the land. Against my better judgment, I agreed. She drove up the next afternoon in a rental car, dressed in jeans and a simple shirt. Nothing like the designer outfit she'd worn to the will reading. She looked older, tired. Thank you for seeing me, she said, standing awkwardly in the yard. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. What do you want? She looked around, at the restored cabin, the healthy pastures, the cattle grazing peacefully. I wanted to see what you built, and to apologize. I didn't respond. just waited. I've been thinking a lot about Uncle Ray, about what happened. Brad and Michael are angry, but I'm ashamed. You're right. We weren't family. We were just people who shared DNA. We treated him terribly. Treated you terribly. I'm sorry. The apology surprised me. Why now? Because my life fell apart. Husband left me. Company I worked for downsized. I ended up with nothing despite all that education and money and success. And I realized I never built anything real. I just accumulated things. When it all went away, there was nothing underneath. No foundation. No purpose. She wiped her eyes. I drove out here thinking about how you worked for 20 years and got nothing. That's what Brad called it. But you didn't get nothing. You got this. You built this. And even if Uncle Ray hadn't left you the land, you'd still have the skills, the knowledge, the character you built by doing the work. I have none of that. I didn't know what to say. Jennifer continued, I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to tell you I understand now why Uncle Ray did what he did. And I wanted to say I'm sorry for being so blind. We talked for an hour. Really talked. Maybe for the first time ever. About Uncle Ray. About regrets. About what matters. When she left, she hugged me. Thank you for showing me what I should have valued, she said. I never heard from Brad or Michael again. But Jennifer called occasionally. Never asked for anything. Just checked in. Maybe she learned something after all. 5 years after Uncle Ray's death, I stood on the porch of the restored homestead cabin watching the sunrise. The land stretched out before me. 300 acres of prime ranch land, healthy and productive. We were running 100 head of cattle now, turning consistent profit. Jake had become a true partner, handling day-to-day operations while I focused on long-term planning. We'd even taken on another young worker, a kid from a rough background who needed a chance just like I'd needed. The cabin behind me was beautiful. I'd restored it carefully, keeping the original character while adding modern necessities. Wood floors worn smooth by generations of Pattersons. A stone fireplace Uncle Ray's grandfather had built. Windows looking out over land that had been in the family for 100 years and would stay in the family as long as I lived. I'd even started dating. A woman named Sarah who owned the feed store in town, who understood ranch life, who didn't mind dirt and early mornings. She was coming over for dinner tonight. Life was good. Simple, but good. My phone buzzed. A text from Morrison. Thought you'd want to know. Brad filed for bankruptcy last month. Went through his inheritance in 5 years. Guess money doesn't last as long as land. I stared at the message for a long moment. Felt no satisfaction, no schadenfreude. Just sadness that Brad had never learned what Uncle Ray tried to teach all of us. I texted back. That's unfortunate. Thanks for letting me know. Then I put my phone away and watched the sun climb higher, painting the pastures gold. Uncle Ray had been right about everything. The land lasted. Hard work mattered. Loyalty was rewarded. Building something real, something that would outlast you, was the only success that counted. I thought about that letter he'd left with the deed. Build something good here, Tom. Build something that lasts. I was doing exactly that. Not just a ranch, but a legacy. Not just for me, but for Jake and whoever came after. A place where hard work was valued, where loyalty mattered, where people built things instead of just taking them. Uncle Ray would have been proud. I was proud. And that was enough. The end.